Hello and welcome back, a Friday edition. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. Edward Osovich, George Stoy here from the SoonerScoop.com studios on Campus Corner. A busy Friday.
Very busy. Football practice was good, though.
Went to football outside. Beautiful weather today. We went outside for the first time, I believe, since we've been going to practice. Everything's been indoors over at the Everest Center, but did go to practice today. So about 30, 35 minutes of practice. Some breaking news coming out of practice. Another injured Oklahoma Sooner. Jalil Farouk has fractured his left foot, and it was something that you reported on a little bit ago.
Yeah, we saw him out there on the scooter. You can see him there with the cast on his left foot. Usually cast means that he broke something, and so checked in with a few people. They got back to me. He did fracture his foot, I think, a few days ago in practice. But the good news on this, Eddie,
yeah, I was going to say, like, that's the best case scenario, right?
Correct. I mean, if he was tearing ligaments in his ankle or, you know, something like that, then it would be pretty bad news. But a fracture in this case is actually something that's not too bad. And the hope is that he will be back, you know, for the start of the season and maybe even some of fall camp. So it won't be out too long. And, you know, honestly, and I wrote this in my story, if there's one position that you can maybe take a little bit of a hit, it's wide receiver. You got a lot of different guys there that can step up and can contribute. Obviously, Deion Burks has been kind of a stud through all of this. Jaden Gibson has been really good. So that's one spot that you can afford it. And, you know, he's a senior. He's been through this. He doesn't exactly need the spring. Obviously, missing some workouts in the summer might hurt you. But, you know, if you can get him back late fall camp or even just before the season starts, I think he'll be fine.
Speaking of Jaden Gibson, we talked to him a little bit after practice. We will have all the post-practice interview stuff on Monday when we return and kind of delve into a lot of it. But we did talk to Jaden Gibson, and you talk about a guy that he was obviously very good in front of the microphone last year. It seems like this year he's a little bit more mature. He kind of knows where he's at in the wide receiver room, and certainly, you know, him talking about his relationship with Jackson Arnold, it seemed like that was a positive, and I think that we've seen that come to fruition, at least on the field in some of the scrimmages. I know that he's kind of been one of the guys when you're talking about the wide receiver unit.
It's been him and Deion Burks.
Sure.
You know, I think it's now 2 or 3 straight scrimmages that Jaden Gibson has scored a touchdown in those scrimmages, so clearly he's become kind of a guy that you know, Jackson Arnold has kind of looked towards in the end zone. I think he's been kind of a deep threat, obviously a big-bodied guy that I think they can get in the end zone. And then Deion Burks, I know he caught a touchdown pass in the last scrimmage as well, so it seems like he's starting to connect with Jackson Arnold. But those are the 2 names at receiver that we've heard a lot about. Obviously, Farouk is now hurt. Nick Anderson hasn't practiced much this spring. The other guy, Jaquez Petaway, I think he's been getting a lot of run with the first team, Ivan Carry-On. So they've got a lot of dudes at receiver, but the 2 definitely that have stood out the most, which are Jaden Gibson and Deion Burks, which is funny because it's like the tallest guy and the smallest guy.
Yeah,
but,
no doubt about it.
Both of them have been, I guess, not exceeding expectations, kind of living up, I would say, to those expectations this spring.
Gavin Freeman's also been out a little bit.
Yep, Gavin Freeman.
Not even a little bit, for the entirety of the spring. So that was good news. It sounds like the offense had a really good day on Friday.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard. I heard the offensive line especially maybe had its best practice.
You think they just played the unofficial 40 on loop about us talking about tampering with other guys?
I mean, it was a week ago, too. We were talking about PJ, and all of a sudden he's been a guy that has really stood out in practice.
Need the Sooner Scoop bump.
Exactly. But we were out there for some of the 2-minute drill that they were running, and the first team offense certainly looked like they were providing some time to Jackson Arnold.
Sure.
It was interesting. We saw Jacob Sexton was playing left guard instead of Heath Ozeta with that first group. So interesting to see kind of that first team offensive line. Michael Tarquin at left tackle, Josh Bates at center, Fabici Wiwu at right guard, and then Jake Taylor at right tackle.
That's where guy kind of gets interesting, and it's something that has happened here over the last couple of weeks. And who knows, is this a product of somebody else that had another injury when we were out there today? And Daniel Akinkumi, the freshman out of Great Britain, was also on a scooter, so you would imagine that he's going to be sidelined for the rest of the spring. It's interesting, though, because there's a guy that has some playing time, or at least some starts at tackle, that looks like he's moved inside, and that's Jacob Sexton. Let's talk about the offensive line a little bit, because that has obviously been a very important unit. It's been probably the talk of camp so far throughout the spring, is where this thing is at.
I think the biggest thing to note with the offensive line is they're playing guys at different spots. I mean, we mentioned it. Jacob Sexton, he's played right tackle, he's played left tackle, and now it looks like he's maybe moved inside to play a little bit of left guard. And you wonder, is that, Daniel Akinkumi was sort of the backup left guard, a couple weeks ago, and Heath Ozeda was the starting left guard. Well, now that Daniel Akinkumi is out, they move Heath Ozeda back to the second group, Jacob Sexton up to the first group, which Jacob Sexton, I think, has the potential to be their best offensive lineman. I mean, he's got a lot of talent. And so seeing him at left guard is not something that I think we expected, but if you're talking about getting your best 5 out there, he's probably in that group. So I think that Bill Bedenbaugh is using this spring to kind of fill out, okay, who are the best 5? Who do you trust the most? Where can guys play to get that best unit up there? And I think that, look, it's not been great, and we talked about that on the official 40. But
one day doesn't make up for 3.5 weeks.
But I do think it is getting to a point where maybe it is starting to click a little bit. Maybe they are starting to find some things, and I do think that sometimes we get overreactionary to what happens in the spring. And I think that right now, with so many different guys and so many different pieces, and maybe guys that they might add in the portal, they're just trying things out with the offensive line. So I think it's too early to say, oh man, this group's going to suck or this group's going to be better than people think. Right now, I think that they're just still feeling things out. So I would be patient with it. We'll see if they can add some more bodies. I think they want to add at least 2 or 3 more guys up front on the offensive line if they can find the right pieces in the portal in the spring. But I do think that it's starting to maybe get a little bit better.
Something that might not be an overreaction right now, George, is the fact that maybe Michael Tarquin has been a little bit better than people thought he was going to be coming into Norman. He's made a really good impression so far.
He might be the biggest surprise in the portal that they got, other than maybe Bauer Sharp. I think Bauer Sharp is definitely somebody that is
somebody else we talked to today that we'll talk about on Monday. A little bit bigger, not to just completely hijack this, but he looks really, really good.
Athletic guy, looks like he can run, super physical, definitely looks the part. But in terms of Michael Tarquin, I think that that's a guy that when they got him, we were kind of like, oh, he's a nice depth piece. He'll be a swing tackle, can maybe play guard, can kind of be that sixth man, if you will, for that offensive line.
He was kind of taken aback by that idea, I remember, at that first newcomer media
He didn't
day.
appreciate that narrative, but he has really been pretty impressive at left tackle, and you wonder, can he maybe win that starting job, especially if, Jacob Sexton was the guy that we all thought would be the starting left tackle.
Sure.
Well, now if Jacob Sexton's moving inside, you would think Michael Tarquin can lock up that left tackle spot. But of all the guys in the portal and maybe even all the guys in the offensive line, he's been maybe the biggest surprise, and it's a welcome surprise because if all of a sudden you can have him starting at left tackle and move Sexton somewhere else and maybe even someone else at right tackle, then you're feeling pretty good about yourself. So that's a good thing that's happening on the offensive line right now.
Seems like Jake Taylor continues to get a little bit of run too. And just from a purely aesthetic standpoint, the man looks like an offensive lineman.
He looks the part for sure. I think for him, it's a mental thing, just getting the reps on the field. He's a guy now, in his 3rd year, hasn't seen a lot of playing time. So just trying to get as many reps as possible out there. I think Spencer Brown is still coming along. We haven't heard a whole lot about him, but Jake Taylor has taken a lot of those reps with the first team, and I think he's just trying to get more comfortable. That's another spot, though. If OU can go out in the spring portal and find someone with some good experience, I think they'll definitely take someone at tackle.
Speaking of experience, we talked to Josh Bates on Friday afternoon, and I think that there's been a lot of attention placed on him, obviously, at the center position because of the injury to Troy Everett. I guess I would ask you this, George. Have we been a little too harsh on him? There was a lot of talk about experience, and especially at the center position, that he feels like he just needs a little bit more of to be more confident, which inevitably would help him perform a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that for him, it's kind of like Jake Taylor. He just hasn't played a lot of football, especially at this level, and so it's a big learning curve, and he's really being thrown into a position that I don't think a lot of people expected. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be the starting center next year, and I still don't think so. I think they're going to try and get somebody in the portal that can maybe be a 1-year rental before Josh Bates is truly ready. And I think that for him, it's a mental thing, and I think it's also a physical thing. I think he's just having to adjust to that. And talking to him today, I think that he understands that, and he understands that he has to get a lot better, and he's kind of approaching it that way. I think snaps have been an issue for him throughout practice, so that's something that he has to work on, and that's just a repetition thing. That's just after practice, snapping the ball more, putting it where Jackson Arnold wants it. So
I couldn't play, but I could snap a football.
Exactly. I mean, me too. I played center as well.
Interesting.
Back in high school.
Can you see the difference between 6A and 5A in the state of Oklahoma?
Yeah, that's true. But I think that, look, Bates is a project in the long term. Maybe he can improve a lot over the summer and going into fall camp, but I think that center, among all the positions in the offensive line that they have to go get somebody in the portal, I definitely think center is going to be the spot because Troy Everett, they hope to get him back. I just wouldn't count on it. The way that we've heard things about him, I would not count on him being ready to go, especially at the start of the season.
No doubt about it. And that's why you talk about the Hickman kid. We already have him confirmed. You confirmed it that he's going to be making a visit next weekend for the spring game.
Yeah, from SMU, started 33 games, definitely super experienced. Not the biggest guy. I think he's 6'3", 295, but that's about where you want your center in terms of size-wise. But he's playing a lot of football, and I know it's at SMU, but he's held his own, and he's not going to come in here and be –
ACC program. You better watch it.
Yeah, exactly. They are. But he's not going to come in and be an All-American, right? He's not going to be Creed Humphrey, but I do think,
predicting the Remington Award to come back to Norman, Oklahoma
but
next year.
Do I think he could be as good as like an Eric Wren from 2017? I certainly do. I think that he is somebody that can come in. He's a smart football player, and so we'll see. I know there's a lot of other schools trying to get him. TCU, Arkansas. I think Ole Miss is in the mix there as well. We know Ole Miss is a player in the NIL game, but hopefully, for OU's sake, that he's somebody that maybe they can get in here.
All right, let's get to some of the good stuff. We were able to see like something that we had not seen before at an Oklahoma practice before. Today was a little 2-minute drill with some like 1s versus 2s, 2 versus 1s. That was a lot of fun to be able to see. And, maybe it was a little bit of a start of what was to come. Jackson Arnold had a pretty good day, drove him down. It's basically they were taking the ball over with about, what were they saying, like 26 seconds,
50-yard line, no timeouts.
You were trying to get into field goal range, right?
Right. And I think that the first couple plays, I think Jackson hit Gavin Sawchuk for a little gain off to the side, and then Jackson scrambled for a few yards, and then the big gain was a pass downfield to Jaden Gibson that set up around a 40-yard field goal for Tyler Keltner, which he hit. And then the second unit.
Good news. They had a couple kickers that knocked down some kicks today.
The second
unit.
looked
good doing it.
The second unit didn't move the ball as well. They were going up against the first-team defense, and I think it was mostly just Michael Hawkins scrambling around for 3 straight plays, and it was a longer field goal. I think it was a 50-plus yard field goal, and Zach Schmidt nailed it. So
nailed it.
That's what you.
Then he gave the finger to George because he doesn't think he can kick.
No, I mean hey. Yeah, what was it that practice that he said? Put that on Twitter to us. But,
that's great.
I think that it's good to at least see those guys. Now, look, it's one thing doing it in practice in front of us. It's another thing doing it on Saturdays.
I thought it was a difference in doing it in the indoor versus doing it out there today where it was pretty windy. It wasn't. It's not Augusta National wind right now, but it was windy.
Well, and I think that, too, just in that scenario – no timeouts. They were having to rush the unit on there to get it up in time and not run out of, time on there. But I think I was more impressed, though, with, look, you watch these clips here, the offensive line holding up. And I get it. This is the second unit defensive line, kind of a mix and match. I know that Kip Lewis was out there, Trace Ford, but, the offensive line, for the most part, held up in this drill and allowed Jackson Arnold some time. You see him scrambling there, but it's mostly because nobody was open. Sure. It wasn't because he didn't have enough time, but I thought Jackson did really well. Here's the play to Gibson down the sideline. I mean, that's a good throw, hanging in there. I think there was only 10 seconds left on the clock. You got to pick up a first down. Yeah, get in field goal position. I thought that was a really good job by the offense.
Here's the kick by Keltner. Coming up after this kick, I want to talk about somebody that we actually talked to after practice. You spent time with him. A guy that we talked about on the unofficial 40. There he is, number 34, PJ Adebore. He had a sack during this 2-minute drill, or what would have been a sack. I think it was more of a quarterback pressure here coming up on Michael Hawkins, but he told you he wants to get to 260?
Yeah, he was telling me after practice that the biggest emphasis for him this offseason was just eating and being in the weight room and just getting bigger, because he felt like last year he just wasn't big enough to really contribute the way that he wanted to. And I think also just the mental part of the game. But he's up to 248. He wants to get to 260 by the season. He said at the bare minimum 255, which I think he can easily do. I think it was
He's already a big guy. I mean, look at it. From a frame aspect, it looks amazing.
R. Mason Thomas said after practice that he's starting to look like Myles Garrett, which I wouldn't go that far. Okay. That's quite the which, by the way, what a kick there. That was Zach Schmidt there.
I'll believe 50. It. If he wants to say that he's Myles Garrett, I'll go with him. I'll just need to see it on Saturday.
He probably needs to put on about maybe 30 more pounds to get to Myles Garrett level. But
if he could be, half of the player that Myles Garrett is next season, that would obviously be a step in the right direction for his second year in Norman, more seriously.
Just getting in the rotation. Because I think that when you look at that defensive end room right now, You love Ethan Downs being back, has played a lot of football. R. Mason Thomas is the healthiest he's been. I've heard that he's had a really good spring. You bring back a veteran in Trace Ford. You bring in Caden Willard. And then there's PJ. And I think PJ can kind of be that difference maker. And last year you saw flashes. He'd get in games at certain times, but just wasn't there yet. I think now he's really stepping into a role that they feel comfortable playing him a lot more. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and start, but I do think he's going to be getting a lot more playing time than maybe he did a year ago.
You mentioned that there's a lot of mixing, a lot of matching that goes on during this spring period. One of the things that we were able to see during that 2-minute drill, and it was something you mentioned to me on the way back over here to the office, was DeShawn Mulla.
Yeah.
Next to Danny Stutzman with the first-team defense today at
DeShawn
linebacker.
Mulla and Lewis Carter. I think Lewis Carter's been getting some reps at first team. Now, Kip Lewis is obviously in the mix as well.
If the game was tomorrow, I would expect
Kip Lewis.
Right.
Yes, but I do think DeShawn Mulla has had a really good transition to will linebacker, which, we saw it last year. Playing cheetah, he was really good at certain things, right? When they threw screen passes out to the side or they ran the ball on the edge, he was really good. And I think that's where they saw, okay, we need to move him somewhere he can go and just find the football, be a tackler in the run game. And I think he's kind of found a spot at that will linebacker. They just have so many guys at inside linebacker right now. It's like, who's going to fit where? I mean, we haven't heard a lot about Jaron Kanek. I think Kobe McKenzie's had a pretty good spring as well, but I think that they are starting to feel really good about DeShawn Mulla as well as Lewis Carter. And talking to Lewis Carter after practice today too was interesting. It sounds like he's really mentally kind of picking up the game a little bit faster.
I think the same could be said for Samuel Omosigo, who we talked to for the first time today. And that was really, truly the first time that I had really been, I guess, up close with Omosigo. I think he's a little bit bigger than I thought he was.
Did you know he's a TikTok star?
Did not.
Yeah, he's
how many followers?
I think like almost 100,000 maybe.
Really?
Yeah, he's big on TikTok. I think he's probably their biggest personality on TikTok right now. But I think Samuel Omosigo is a guy that can definitely can contribute next year. That cheetah spot's interesting because you have Woody Washington playing there a little bit, Kendall Dolby obviously. But if you want a bigger body guy that can run, Samuel Omosigo kind of fits that identity. So you wonder, can he find himself playing a bigger role this year as well?
I think both of those guys, Lewis Carter and Samuel Omosigo, are guys that we've talked about with Josh before, just in terms of when you talk about the recruiting side of things and identifying guys that maybe don't fit, a particular, check. They don't check the boxes of, oh, they're this tall or they're this big, but they're football players.
Oh, yeah. I mean, both those guys, you watch them, and they're just running to the football. They're bullets. That's the way I like to describe them, is they're always finding the football. They may not always be in the right spot. They may misread things here or there, but, man, they can fly, and they're physical. I think that's a big thing, especially with Lewis Carter. He is a super physical guy. He loves to hit people. So I think both those guys, you want them to stick around, right? Because you look at the transfer portal coming up here next week in the spring, and you're like, okay, well, what position groups are pretty deep that maybe they could lose a guy or two? And you look at linebacker because they have so many guys. Now, I'm not saying those two are going to enter the portal or anything, but you just hope that, hey, give it one more year, and all of a sudden those guys are going to be starters for you, and they could be really, really good players.
It'll be pretty fun to see some of these guys out on the field. You won't have to wait all the way until August or September to do so. The spring game coming up a week from Saturday. So we're kind of inside that window where it feels like it's starting to get a little bit real that you are going to be able to see some of these guys. It was good to see them on Friday just for a little bit of a snapshot. They had a coach's clinic in Norman this weekend. There was a lot of alumni or I guess boosters that were at practice on Friday as well. So that's going to do it for the week here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Once again, we will have plenty of coverage coming up throughout the weekend with baseball and softball. Bob over at softball, I'm about to head over to baseball for a big series against Kansas State. Softball already with an 8-0 win on Thursday night. You can catch the stickball report right here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, and that's probably
we'll be back Monday. We'll be back Monday.
Yeah, there's
probably
plenty to get into with all the.
We'll talk to like 9 or 10 guys.
All the interviews that we did tonight, and again, Bauer Sharp was really good as well.
Yeah.
I thought what he talked about, just in terms of understanding the offense, being a former quarterback, it was something that you had wrote about as well. Yeah. So it's really good.
He's going to start there. I think.
Oh,
for sure.
No doubt about it. It's going to be a really good weekend. Got the Masters on as well. Speaking of, had the opportunity to sit down with Brad Dahlke, Joe Castiglione Jr., as well as Isaac Stoops, allowed me to get on the family business this week, and it was good to catch up with Brad and kind of get a little bit of insight into somebody that actually played in the Masters in 2017. So For George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page.